Prueba, 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 prueba. Bien, chicos, ¿qué tal? Buenas noches. Vamos a empezar con el capítulo 2 de Scrum. El día de ayer vimos todo lo que corresponde al capítulo 1, que básicamente es la introducción a los fundamentos de Scrum, sobre la metodología de trabajo, el flujograma de lo que utiliza Scrum, los principios y los aspectos que cubre Scrum, las fases de Scrum y la comparación entre Scrum contra las metodologías de gestión de proyecto comunes. Lo que vamos a ver el día de hoy nuevamente son algunos cuantos videos para que luego de terminar con los videos hagamos el último test del capítulo 2 y finalizando el test del capítulo 2 ya ustedes van a poder dar su examen. Como les comenté en el video anterior, el examen de Scrum, de certificación de Scrum, dura entre 35 a 50 minutos. No sé exactamente qué cantidad de tiempo está ahorita, creo que está mínimo en 35. Y son 35 preguntas en total. Las preguntas de los test son más difíciles que las preguntas del examen, así que no se asusten mucho si ustedes lo ven algo difícil. Vamos a empezar poniendo el primer video del capítulo 2, que es la introducción a los principios de Scrum.
Hello, and welcome to our Scrum Study course on a guide to the Scrum body of knowledge. In our introduction to the SBOC guide, we covered an overview of Scrum as a framework, the purpose, how it's used, the framework of Scrum, and how it differs from other traditional project management methods. Now that we have quite a bit of information about Scrum, it's time to share the ground rules governing Scrum as a framework. These ground rules are the Scrum principles. And the Scrum principles are the foundation on which the Scrum framework is based. The principles of Scrum can be applied to any type of project or organization. They must be followed in order to ensure an appropriate and successful application of Scrum. Within the scope of these principles, the aspects and processes of Scrum can still be modified to meet the requirements of a specific project or of the organization using them. The Scrum principles themselves, however, are non-negotiable and must be applied as described in a guide to the Scrum body of knowledge, or the SBOC guide. Keeping the principles intact and using them appropriately gives those using Scrum confidence in the framework's ability to help them attain their project's objectives. The principles are considered the core guidelines for applying the Scrum framework. According to the definition in the SBOC guide, the principles are applicable to portfolios, programs, and projects in any industry, projects of any size or complexity, products, services, and any other desired results to be delivered to stakeholders. In applying these principles, it's helpful to remember how the SBOC guide defines the term product. The term product can refer to a product, service, or other deliverable. The Scrum principles are as scalable as Scrum itself. The scalability of Scrum is that it can be applied effectively to any project in any industry, be it small projects with teams of 6 members or large, complex projects with up to several hundred team members. The 6 Scrum principles include the following. Empirical process control, in which many decisions are made based on observation and experimentation rather than on detailed and predictive upfront planning. Self-organization, which implies that team members have the authority and responsibility to figure out ways to convert the prioritized product backlog into finished products without the intervention of stakeholders outside of the Scrum team. Collaboration, in which product development is a shared value creation process that needs all stakeholders working and interacting together to deliver the greatest value. Value-based prioritization, in which the highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of maximum business value. Time box. Hello, and welcome to our Scrum Study course on a guide to the Scrum body in the industry, be it small projects with teams of 6 members or large, complex projects with up to several hundred team members. The 6 Scrum principles include the following. Empirical process control, in which many decisions are made based on observation and experimentation rather than on detailed and predictive upfront planning. Self-organization, which implies that team members have the authority and responsibility to figure out ways to convert the prioritized product backlog into finished products without the intervention of stakeholders outside of the Scrum team. Collaboration, in which product development is a shared value creation process that needs all stakeholders working and interacting together to deliver the greatest value. Value-based prioritization, in which the highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of maximum business value. Time boxing, in which time is considered a primary constraint and many Scrum processes and activities are allotted a fixed amount of time. And iterative development, in which all work is divided into units that can produce a potentially shippable deliverable. Each of these will be developed in more detail in the next sessions. And this wraps up our introduction to Scrum principles. I look forward to seeing you in the next session, in which we'll study what the SBOC guy says about empirical process control. Until then, thank you for learning with us.
A ver, en este primer video habló sobre los principios y los aspectos de Scrum, principalmente la parte de los principios que ya lo habíamos visto en el test anterior. Aquí se especifican los 6 principios que maneja Scrum, sobre lo que se realiza en cada una de las fases del proyecto gestionado en Scrum. Así que tomen nota de eso, memorícenlo, grábenlo, porque eso sí viene en el examen. ¿Cuáles son los aspectos o definir cuál de ellos no es un aspecto? Es una pregunta fija de Scrum. El segundo video también es muy importante, es la guía de roles y control de procesos de manera empírica, o sea, en base a experiencia. Se asignan los roles y responsabilidades del equipo de proyecto.
Welcome back to Module 2, Scrum Principles. In this session, we'll see how decisions are made in Scrum and what the 3 main characteristics of empirical process control are. In Scrum, decisions are based on observation and experimentation rather than on detailed upfront planning. Empirical process control relies on 3 main ideas of transparency, inspection, and adaptation. We'll now discuss the 3 main ideas of empirical process control with the help of a few diagrams. Let's start with the first idea, transparency. Transparency allows all facets of any Scrum process to be observed by anyone. This promotes an easy and transparent flow of information throughout the organization and creates an open work culture. In Scrum, transparency is provided by openly sharing the project vision statement, which can be viewed by all stakeholders and the Scrum team. The prioritized product backlog with user stories that can be viewed by everyone, both inside and outside the team. The release planning schedule, which may be coordinated across multiple Scrum teams. Information radiators, such as the Scrum board and burn-down charts, which make a team's progress clearly visible to all. And by daily stand-up meetings conducted during the Conduct Daily Stand-Up process, in which all team members report what they've done the previous day, what they plan to do today, and any problems preventing them from completing their tasks in the current sprint. The next characteristic of empirical process control is inspection. Let's have a look at the displayed diagram, which summarizes the concept of inspection in Scrum. Scrum provides a point of inspection with the use of a common Scrum board and other information radiators, which show the progress of the Scrum team on completing the tasks in the current sprint. The collection of feedback from the customer and other stakeholders during the develop epochs create prioritized product backlog, and conduct release planning processes give additional opportunities for inspection. The final point of inspection comes during the review meeting, when the team seeks approval of the deliverables by the product owner and the customer in the demonstrate and validate sprint process. The third main characteristic of empirical process control is adaptation. Let's take a look at the displayed diagram that summarizes the concept of adaptation in Scrum. Adaptation happens as the Scrum core team and stakeholders learn through transparency and inspection, and then adapt by making improvements in the work they're doing. Some examples of adaptation include the following. In daily stand-up meetings, Scrum team members openly discuss impediments to completing their tasks. After the meeting, the Scrum Master coordinates help from other team members. More experienced members in the Scrum team also mentor those with relatively less experience and knowledge of the project or technology. When the needed resource doesn't reside within the team, the Scrum Master will acquire it externally. Risk identification is performed and iterated throughout the project. Identified risks become inputs to several Scrum processes, including create prioritized product backlog, groom prioritized product backlog, and create sprint backlog. Improvements can also result in change requests, which are discussed and approved during the develop epics, create prioritized product backlog, and groom prioritized product backlog processes. The Scrum guidance body interacts with Scrum team members during the create user stories, estimate tasks, create deliverables, and groom prioritized product backlog processes to offer guidance and also provide expertise as required for the team to adapt to necessary changes and challenges. In the retrospect sprint process, agreed actionable improvements are determined based on the outputs from the demonstrate and validate sprint process. These adaptations are integrated into later sprints and projects. And in the retrospect project meeting, participants document lessons learned and perform reviews looking for opportunities to improve processes and address inefficiencies. Embedded within these processes, practices, and activities of Scrum are numerous opportunities for adapting to changing requirements and business realities. Here's an example of such a challenge faced in waterfall project management style. How the customer explained it, how the project leaders understood it, how the engineers designed it, how construction built it, how the business consultant described it, how the project was documented, what was operational, how the customer was billed, how it was supported, and what the customer really needed. Since it's a sequential approach, incorrect inputs at initial stages translates to unsatisfactory outputs towards the final delivery. With other methods, such as the traditional waterfall model, considerable planning needs to be done in advance of actual production. And the customer generally doesn't review product components until near the end of a phase or the end of the entire project. This method often presents huge risks to the project's success, because the effect of each risk may be amplified through its impact on several developmental processes, and thereby may have more potential for significantly impacting project delivery and customer acceptance. The customer's interpretation and understanding of the finished product may be very different from what was actually understood and produced by the team, and this may not be known until very late in the project's development. The displayed figure demonstrates an example of these challenges. Thank you for learning with us. Hello, and welcome back to Scrum Study. In the last video, you learned about the first principle governing.
Muy bien, en el video anterior se ha visto básicamente el principio que rige Scrum sobre los procesos empíricos en base a experiencia. Más adelante, cuando se vea el tema de colaboración o sprint, se van a dar cuenta que un sprint lo dirige a alguien que tenga la mayor cantidad de experiencia gestionando proyectos de esa rama para ese tipo en Scrum. Básicamente el valor empírico que le da el énfasis del principio real es que la experiencia sobre cómo tratas con las personas y sobre cómo tratas con el cliente asegura que el proyecto termine en el más corto tiempo, porque si tú haces un backlog, como se le conoce, que vimos el video de ayer, de todo lo que has ido haciendo y todo lo que has visto anteriormente, es más fácil dar o tener una perspectiva mayor ante un proyecto. Vamos a ver ahora la autoorganización. Este video es un video corto, no es muy relevante, pero vamos a verlo también.
Scrum, Empirical Process Control. In this segment, we'll be exclusively talking about the second principle, self-organization. Scrum supports the idea that employees are self-motivated and that they seek to accept greater responsibility. So they deliver much greater value when self-organized. Have you heard of servant leadership? This is exactly what we prefer to have in Scrum-controlled projects. The preferred leadership style in Scrum is servant leadership, which emphasizes achieving results by focusing on the needs of the Scrum team. Moreover, self-organization doesn't mean that team members are allowed to act in any manner they want to. Rather, it means that once the product vision is defined in the Create Project Vision process, the product owner, Scrum Master, and Scrum team get identified. Also, the Scrum core team itself works very closely with relevant stakeholders for refining requirements as they go through the develop epics and create user stories processes. Team expertise is used to assess the inputs needed to execute the planned work of the project. This judgment and expertise are applied to all technical and management aspects of the project during the Create Deliverables process. Although prioritization is primarily done by the product owner who represents the voice of the customer, the self-organized Scrum team is involved in task breakdown and estimation during the identify tasks and estimate tasks processes. During these processes, each team member is responsible for determining what he or she will be doing. During a sprint, if team members need any help completing their tasks, they announce these needs during the daily stand-up meetings. The Scrum team itself interacts with other teams through the Scrum of Scrums, or SOS meetings, and can look for additional guidance as required from the Scrum guidance body. Finally, the Scrum team and Scrum Master work closely to demonstrate the product increment created during the sprint in the demonstrate and validate sprint process, where properly completed deliverables are accepted. Since the deliverables are potentially shippable, and the prioritized product backlog is prioritized by user stories in the order of value created by them, the product owner and the customer can clearly visualize and articulate the value being created after every sprint. And Scrum teams, in turn, have the satisfaction of seeing their hard work being accepted by the customer and other stakeholders. Now let's take a closer look at the chief goals of self-organizing teams. They understand the project vision and why the project delivers value to the organization. They estimate user stories during the Estimate User Stories process and assign tasks to themselves during the Create Sprint Backlog process. They identify tasks independently during the Identify Task process. They apply and leverage their expertise from being a cross-functional team to work on the tasks during the Create Deliverable process. They deliver tangible results that are accepted by the customer and other stakeholders during the Demonstrate and Validate Sprint process. They resolve individual problems together by addressing them during daily stand-up meetings. They clarify any discrepancies or doubts and remain open to learning new things. They upgrade knowledge and skill on a continuous basis through regular interactions within the team. And they maintain stability of team members throughout the duration of the project by not changing out team members unless it's unavoidable. To clarify more on this, here we have a diagram depicting the goals of a self-organizing team. In contrast to the traditional command and control style of management, Scrum supports the idea that today's workers have much more knowledge to offer than just their technical expertise, and they can deliver greater value when they're self-organized. And with that, we conclude yet another session on the Scrum principles. I hope this session has informed you on the Scrum principle of self-organization. I look forward to seeing you in the next segment on another Scrum principle. Thanks for watching. Hello and welcome to Module 2, Principles of Scrum. In this session,
o cómo influyen los roles en la compañía en sí. No es muy relevante para la gestión de Scrum, sin embargo, ahí de lo que se puede rescatar de este video es el tema de que el Scrum Master, el Project Creator, el Project Owner, como se le conoce, que es el dueño del proyecto y el equipo de trabajo, en coordinación deben saber quién tiene el más alto nivel y más alto rango de decisión. Eso se ve más adelante también en la parte de iteraciones. Ahora vamos a ver el proceso de colaboración, que sí, para Scrum este proceso sí es relevante. Tomen nota, por favor.
we'll discuss an important concept, collaboration in Scrum. Collaboration refers to the Scrum core team working together and interfacing with the stakeholders to create and validate the deliverables of the project to meet the goals outlined in the project vision. It's important to note the difference between cooperation and collaboration here. Cooperation occurs when the worked product consists of the sum of the work efforts of various people on a team. Collaboration occurs when a team works together to play off each other's inputs to produce something greater. There are three core dimensions of collaborative work. Let's look at them one by one. The first core dimension is awareness. It essentially means that individuals working together need to be aware of each other's work. The next dimension is articulation. Collaborating individuals must divide work into units, distribute those units among team members, and then, after the work is done, reintegrate the units into a cohesive whole. The last core dimension is appropriation, which refers to adapting technology to one's own situation. The technology may be used in a manner completely different than expected by the designers. Now that we have an understanding of collaboration and its core dimensions, let's consider the key benefits of collaboration in Scrum projects. The Agile Manifesto stresses customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Thus, the Scrum framework adopts an approach in which the Scrum core team members, the product owner, Scrum Master, and Scrum team, collaborate with each other and the stakeholders to create the deliverables that provide the greatest possible value to the customer. This collaboration occurs throughout the project. Collaboration ensures that the following benefits are realized. The need for bringing about changes due to poorly clarified requirements is minimized. For example, during the create project vision, develop epics, and create prioritized product backlog processes, the product owner collaborates with stakeholders to create the project vision, epics, and prioritize product backlog, respectively. This will ensure that there's clarity among Scrum core team members on the work that's required to complete the project. The Scrum team collaborates continuously with the product owner and stakeholders through a transparent, prioritized product backlog to create the project deliverables. The processes conduct daily stand-up, groom prioritized product backlog, and retrospect sprint provide scope to the Scrum core team members to discuss what's been done and collaborate on what needs to be done. Thus, the number of change requests from the customer and rework is minimized. The second benefit is that risks are identified and dealt with efficiently. For example, risks to the project are identified and assessed in the develop epics, create deliverables, and conduct daily stand-up processes by the Scrum core team members. The Scrum meeting tools such as the daily stand-up meeting, sprint, planning meeting, prioritized product backlog review meeting, and so on provide opportunities to the team to not only identify and assess risks, but also to implement risk responses to high priority risks. A third benefit is that the true potential of the team is realized. For example, conducting the daily stand-up process provides scope for the Scrum team to collaborate and understand the strengths and weaknesses of its members. If a team member has missed a task deadline, the Scrum team members align themselves collaboratively to complete the task and meet the targets agreed to for completing the sprint. A fourth benefit is that continuous improvement is ensured through lessons learned in collaboration. For example, the Scrum team uses the retrospect sprint process to identify what went well and what didn't go well in the previous sprint. This provides opportunity to the Scrum Master to work with the team and rework and improve the team for the next scheduled sprint. This will also ensure that collaboration is even more effective in the next sprint. Pause this video if you wish to study the displayed diagram. It provides an illustration of the benefits of collaboration in Scrum projects. We'll now consider the importance of co-location in collaboration. For many of the Scrum practices, high bandwidth communication is required. To enable this, it's preferred that team members are co-located. Co-location allows both formal and informal interactions between team members. This provides the advantage of having team members always at hand for coordination, problem solving, and learning. One of the key benefits of co-location is that it allows questions to get answered quickly. Another benefit is that problems are fixed on the spot. With co-location, less friction occurs between interactions. In collaborative, co-located teams, trust is gained and given more quickly. There are collaboration tools that can be used for co-located or distributed items. For co-located teams, those working in the same office, a preferred collaboration tool is face-to-face communications. Co-located teams can also use decision rooms or war rooms, scrum boards, wall displays, shared tables, and so on. Although co-located teams are preferred, at times the Scrum team may be distributed due to outsourcing, offshoring, work-from-home options, and so forth. From distributed teams, some tools that could be used for effective collaboration include video conferencing, instant messaging, chats, social media, shared screens, and software tools which simulate the functionality of Scrum boards, wall displays, and so on. And with that, we conclude this session on the Scrum principle of collaboration. I look forward to seeing you in the next session on the Scrum principle of value-based prioritization. Thank you for learning with us. Now that you have a clear understanding of the Scrum principle of collaboration, I'm going to discuss another important concept called value-based prioritization. The Scrum framework is driven by the goal of delivering maximum business value in a minimum time span. One of the most effective tools for delivering the greatest value in the shortest amount of time is prioritization. Prioritizing can be defined as determining the order and demarcating between what must be done now and what needs to be done later. The concept of prioritization isn't new to project management. The traditional waterfall model of project management proposes using multiple task prioritization tools. Is prioritization an integral concept in Scrum? From the project manager's point of view, prioritization is integral because certain tasks must be accomplished first to expedite the development process and achieve the project goals. Some of the traditional techniques of task prioritization include setting deadlines for delegated tasks and using prioritization matrices. Now I'll take you through another crucial concept, value-based prioritization. Scrum, however, uses value-based prioritization as one of the core principles that drives the structure and functionality of the entire Scrum framework. This concept helps projects benefit through adaptability and iterative development of the product or service. More significantly, Scrum aims at delivering a valuable product or service to the customer on an early and continuous basis. So who handles prioritization? The product owner prioritizes user stories in the prioritized product backlog. The prioritized product backlog contains a list of all the requirements needed to bring the project to fruition. Once the product owner has received the business requirements from the customer and written these down in the form of workable user stories, he or she works with the customer and sponsor to understand which business requirements provide maximum business value. The product owner must understand what the customer wants and values in order to arrange the prioritized product backlog items, or the user stories, by relative importance. Sometimes a customer may insist that all user stories are of high priority. While this might be true, even a list of high-priority user stories should be prioritized within the list itself. Prioritizing a backlog involves determining how critical each user story is. High-value requirements are identified and moved to the top of the prioritized product backlog. The processes in which the principle of value-based prioritization is put into practice are create prioritized product backlog and groom prioritized product backlog. The product owner's work doesn't end here. He or she simultaneously works with the Scrum team to understand the project risks and uncertainty, as they may have negative consequences associated with them. This should be taken into account while prioritizing user stories on a value-based approach. Refer to the risk chapter for more information on this. The Scrum team also alerts the product owner of any dependencies that arise out of implementation. These dependencies must be taken into account during prioritization. Prioritization may be based on a subjective estimate of the projected business value or profitability, or it can be based on results and analysis of the market using tools including, but not limited to, customer interviews, surveys, and financial models and analytical techniques. The product owner has to translate the inputs and needs of the project stakeholders to create the prioritized product backlog. That way, while prioritizing the user stories in the prioritized product backlog, 3 factors are considered: value, risk or uncertainty, and dependencies. Thus, prioritization results in deliverables that satisfy the requirements of the customer with the objective of delivering the maximum business value in the least amount of time. And with that, we conclude this session on the Scrum principle of value-based prioritization. I look forward to seeing you in the next session on the Scrum principle of time boxing. Thank you for learning with us.
Hello, and welcome back to our Scrum Study course on a guide to the Scrum body of knowledge. We have just finished learning about the value-based prioritization as a Scrum principle. In this section, we're going to learn what time boxing is and why it is so critical to the Scrum methodology. Scrum treats time as one of the most important constraints in managing a project. To address the constraints of time, Scrum uses a concept called time boxing, in which a certain amount of time is allocated for each process and activity in a Scrum project. This ensures that Scrum team members do not self-align too much or too little work for a particular period of time and do not expend their time and energy on work for which they have little clarity. Some of the advantages of time boxing are efficient development process, less overheads, high velocity for teams. Time boxing is utilized in many Scrum processes. For example, in the Conduct Daily Stand-Up process, the duration of the daily stand-up meeting is time boxed to 15 minutes. This gives everyone just enough time to give 3 pieces of critical information and no more. What have I done since the last meeting? What do I plan to do before the next meeting? And what impediments or obstacles, if any, am I currently facing? If a team knows they should be offering this and only this information, then the meeting is unlikely to run longer due to time-draining digressions. Time boxing is also useful in avoiding excess improvement or gold plating of an item. One note of caution. Arbitrary time boxing can lead to demotivation of the team and may have the consequence of creating an apprehensive environment, so it should be used appropriately. Let's look more specifically at how time boxing is applied in Scrum. First, a sprint is a time-boxed iteration lasting 1 to 6 weeks, during which the Scrum Master guides, facilitates, and shields the Scrum team from both internal and external impediments. This aids in avoiding vision creep that could affect the sprint goal. During this time, the team works to convert the requirements in the prioritized product backlog into shippable product functionalities. To get maximum benefits from a Scrum project, it is always recommended to keep the sprint time box to 4 weeks, unless there are projects with very stable requirements, where sprints can extend up to 6 weeks. Second, the daily stand-up meeting, which is time boxed to 15 minutes. The team members gather to report the progress of the project by answering the following 3 questions. What have I done since the last meeting? What do I plan to do before the next meeting? And what impediments or obstacles, if any, am I currently facing? This meeting is carried out by the team as part of the Conduct Daily Stand-Up process. Next is the Sprint Planning Meeting. This meeting is conducted prior to the sprint as part of the Plan and Estimate phase. It is time-boxed to 8 hours for a 1-month sprint. The Sprint Planning Meeting is divided into 2 parts. Objective definition. During the first half of the meeting, the product owner explains the highest priority user stories or requirements in the prioritized product backlog to the Scrum team. The Scrum team, in collaboration with the product owner, then defines the sprint goal. Task estimation. During the second half of the meeting, the Scrum team decides how to complete the selected prioritized product backlog items to fulfill the sprint goal. In this context, sprint planning meetings are also conducted during the Identify Task process to identify tasks and during Estimate Task process to estimate identified tasks. While the sprint planning meeting is conducted before the sprint review meeting is conducted after the sprint. It is time-boxed to 4 hours for a 1-month sprint. During the sprint review meeting that is conducted in the Demonstrate and Validate sprint process, the Scrum team presents the deliverables of the current sprint to the product owner. The product owner reviews the product or product increment against the agreed-upon acceptance criteria and either accepts or rejects the completed user stories. Retrospect Sprint Meeting. The Retrospect Sprint Meeting is time-boxed to 4 hours for a 1-month sprint and is conducted as part of the Retrospect Sprint process. During this meeting, the Scrum team gets together to review and reflect on the previous sprint in terms of the processes followed, tools employed, collaboration and communication mechanisms, and other aspects relevant to the project. The team discusses what went well during the previous sprint and what did not go well, the goal being to learn and make improvements in the sprints that follow. Some improvement opportunities or best practices from this meeting could also be updated as part of the Scrum Guidance Body documents. This brings us to the end of our session on the Scrum principles of time boxing, and thank you for learning with us.
Hello and welcome to Scrum Study. In the last video, we saw the 5th principle governing the Scrum methodology, time boxing. This session will introduce you to the 6th Scrum principle, which is iterative development. So let's get started. What does iteration mean? Well, an iteration is the repeating of a process with the aim of approaching the desired goal, target, or result. Each repetition of the process is also called an iteration, and the result of one iteration are used as a starting point for the next iteration. Going by this, the Scrum framework is driven by the goal of delivering maximum business value in a minimum time span. To achieve this practically, Scrum supports the iterative development of deliverables. In most complex projects, the customer may not be able to define very concrete requirements or is not confident of how the end product may look. This is where the iterative model comes to the rescue. It's more flexible in ensuring that any change requested by the customer can be included as part of the project. How is it done? Well, user stories may have to be written constantly throughout the duration of the project. In the initial stages of writing, most user stories are high-level functionalities. These user stories are known as epics. Epics are usually too large for teams to complete in a single sprint. Therefore, they're broken down into smaller user stories. Moving on, Each complex aspect of the project is broken down through progressive elaboration during the SCRUM prioritized product backlog process. The create user stories and the estimate user stories and commit user stories processes are used to add new requirements to the prioritized product backlog. Next, the product owner pitches in. So let's look at what that role entails. The product owner's task is to ensure increased ROI by focusing on value and its continuous delivery with each sprint. The product owner should have a thorough understanding of the project's business justification and the value the project is supposed to deliver. As he or she drafts the prioritized product backlog, and thereby decides what deliverables and values are delivered in each sprint. Then they identify tasks, estimate tasks, and create sprint backlog processes, produce the sprint backlog, which the team uses to create the deliverables. Moreover, in each sprint, the create deliverables process is used to deliver the sprint's outputs. Next, let's consider the Scrum Master's role. The Scrum Master has to ensure that the Scrum processes are followed. He or she facilitates the team to work in the most productive manner possible. Finally, the Scrum team self-organizes and aims to create the sprint deliverables from the user stories in the sprint backlog. In large projects, various cross-functional teams work in parallel across sprints, delivering potentially shippable solutions at the end of each sprint. After the sprint is completed, the product owner accepts or rejects the deliverables based on the acceptance criteria in the demonstrate and validate sprint process. To clarify, here we have an illustration depicting how Scrum projects are completed in an iterative manner and how they deliver value throughout the life cycle of the project. So what's the benefit of applying this Scrum principle to the project? The benefit of iterative development is that it allows for course correction as all the people involved get better understanding of what needs to be delivered as part of the project and incorporates these learnings in an iterative manner. Thus, the time and effort required to reach the final endpoint is greatly reduced, and the team produces deliverables that are better suited to the final business environment. And with that, we conclude yet another session on the Scrum principles. I hope this session was informative and suggestive of the Scrum principle, iterative development. I look forward to seeing you in the next segment on another Scrum principle. Thanks for watching. Hello and welcome back to Scrum Study. So far, we've discussed the 6 principles that guide Scrum. Have you ever wondered why Scrum is becoming more popular with every passing day? Well, in many ways, Scrum is better than the traditional project management methods. Let's consider in detail some of these differences between Scrum and traditional project management models. The main difference is the way in which projects are handled. The emphasis in traditional project management is to conduct detailed upfront planning for the project with emphasis on fixing the scope, cost, and schedule and managing those parameters. Traditional project management may at times lead to a situation where the plan has succeeded, yet the customer isn't satisfied. Scrum encourages data-based iterative decisions over the detailed upfront planning practiced in traditional waterfall-style project management. The focus isn't on meeting the project plan's targets, but on satisfying customer requirements. Traditional project management can lead to a situation where the plan has succeeded, yet the customer isn't satisfied. In addition to iterative planning and delivery, Scrum supports the collaboration of all parties involved, be it the customer, business team, or technical team, to minimize risk and achieve satisfaction. Scrum is often contrasted with the other linear fashion project methods because of the low upfront planning and scheduling of activities that are followed by execution. The Scrum framework is founded on the belief that the knowledge workers of today can offer much more than just their technical expertise, and that trying to fully map out and plan for an ever-changing environment isn't efficient. Therefore, Scrum encourages data-based, iterative
Toma,
decision-making.
acuérdense de eso también. Scrum
In
anima la
Scrum,
toma de
the
decisiones
primary
iterativa.
focus is on delivering
O sea, no
products
esperan
that
tanto
satisfy
una
customer
aprobación o algo,
requirements
puedes tomar
in
la decisión
small,
de
iterative,
implementar.
shippable increments. To deliver the greatest amount of value in the shortest amount of time, Scrum promotes prioritization and time boxing over fixing the scope, cost, and schedule of a project. An important feature of Scrum is self-organization, which allows the individuals who are actually doing the work to estimate and take ownership of tasks. We can conclude this segment by saying that all in all, Scrum is an updated theory for managing any type of project, suited to our time and age, ready to replace the traditional project management techniques that were created in and for a bygone era. And with that, we come to the end of this session on Scrum versus traditional project management methods. And this marks the end of our module on the principles of Scrum as presented in A Guide to the Scrum Body of Knowledge. We at Scrum Study look forward to seeing you in more of our informational videos. Until then, thank you for learning with us. Guide to the Scrum Body of Knowledge. In our introduction to the SBOC Guide, we covered an overview of Scrum as a framework.
En español no aparecen los tres. Entramos nuevamente y vamos a entrar capítulo 2, test. Vamos a ponerle 18 preguntas, ¿ya? Empezando la pregunta 1. Empezamos. Pregunta 1 y 18. ¿Cuál de los siguientes principios de Scrum guía la planificación de un proyecto Scrum? Time boxing, value basic priorization, self-organization y collaboration. Primero siempre hagan memoria de cuáles son los principios y cuáles son los aspectos. Son 6 aspectos y 5 principios de Scrum. Dentro de los principios de Scrum, value basic priorization, vamos a marcarlo y check answer, esa es la respuesta correcta porque es la única que es un principio. Las otras 3 son más que todo fáciles. Sin embargo, la priorización del valor basado es la respuesta correcta, debido a que aquí nos aparece la justificación que los principios de Scrum pueden ser aplicados para cualquier tipo de proyecto en una organización. Aquí menciona los principios de Scrum: el proceso de control empírico, autoorganización, eso también puede ser una respuesta, colaboración, value based priorization y time boxing. ¿Qué es autoorganización? ¿Se refiere a la priorización de la creación de altos valores entregables sobre bajos valores? No. ¿Se refiere a la entrega del máximo valor de negocio en un mínimo tiempo? Tampoco. ¿Se refiere al énfasis de obtener resultados enfocándose en las necesidades del equipo de Scrum? Correcto. Recuerden que Scrum siempre le da enfoque principal al equipo de trabajo. O sea, si el equipo de trabajo está bien, si el equipo de trabajo tiene experiencia, si el equipo de trabajo está animado, la productividad crece de manera exponencial. Esto lo acaban de explicar, es una pregunta. La priorización del valor base se refiere a la priorización de la creación de la mayor cantidad de valores entregables. Bueno, nuestra respuesta con base a la pregunta anterior. ¿Qué es la caja de tiempo? Le da, como su nombre lo dice, el máximo valor entregable en un menor tiempo. ¿No? Bueno, si no es eso, es la respuesta 4. Se refiere al manejo o arreglo de un monto certero de tiempo para cada uno de los procesos que se aplican en las actividades de un proyecto de Scrum. Scrum treats time as one of the most important constraints in managing a project. El Scrum trata el tiempo como una de las restricciones más importantes. Recuerda que Scrum, como los vimos en el capítulo 1, también tiene restricciones, la triple restricción y la restricción extendida de alcance, tiempo, costo, calidad, etc. En este caso, la que se enfoca más es la del tiempo y la del alcance. Para los que están en el stream, por favor presionen 1 en el chat para saber que están ahí. Si tienen alguna consulta o duda con respecto al cuestionario que estamos resolviendo, pueden hacerla, por favor. Terminando este test, ustedes ya están aptos para dar el examen. El test, como lo estamos viendo ahorita, es más difícil que el examen en sí, así que no se preocupen si es que hay algo que no entienden. El examen es sentido común en realidad. ¿Qué es un desarrollo iterativo? Se refiere al desarrollo de proyectos con un objetivo final, se refiere al desarrollo de proyectos entregables usando procesos automatizados, se refiere al desarrollo de proyectos que tienen como salidas el detalle de lo que se está planificando, o se refiere a usar más que un producto, un ciclo de desarrollo para los entregables finales del proyecto. La respuesta 1 es la correcta, porque hace unos 2 o 3 videos, si mal no lo recuerdo, explicaban que el desarrollo del producto siempre tiene que tener un uso más de tiempo y de alcance para que se logre obtener los entregables finales y principales del proyecto. Aquí está. En proyectos más complejos, justamente, el cliente no está apto para definir concretamente los requerimientos o no tiene la confianza para ello. Por eso es que usamos más de un desarrollador de producto o más de un producto desarrollado para poder justificar las necesidades del proyecto. ¿Cuál de los siguientes enunciados define mejor la colaboración? La colaboración, bueno, es la respuesta 1, tal vez, bueno, no. Se refiere a que los miembros del SCRUM de manera individual están al tanto del trabajo de cada uno de otros. No, perdón, esto lo hace el Scrum Master, tiene razón, esa no es la respuesta. Se refiere a que el equipo de trabajo de Scrum debe trabajar en conjunto e interactuando con los interesados para crear y validar los entregables del proyecto. No, esta tampoco podría ser la respuesta en realidad, porque los interesados o los stakeholders no gestionan con el equipo de trabajo de Scrum, sino directamente con el Scrum Master. La respuesta es la 3. ¿Ah? ¿Por qué? Bueno, aquí sí cambió algo, porque yo sí marqué la 3 cuando vi mi examen, me vino esta pregunta. Bueno, la respuesta aparentemente es la 2, que el equipo de trabajo debe trabajar en conjunto con los interesados. Bueno, eso ha cambiado en realidad, porque antes tú nunca veías el Scrum Master, lo veías en una sola reunión, que era la reunión de levantamiento de información inicial o de requerimientos con los stakeholders, y ahí no se veía. Vamos a leer la justificación, pero esta pregunta sí me parece un poco extraña. Colaboración en Scrum refiere al núcleo de Scrum en sí, del equipo de proyecto, cómo se trabaja y cómo interactúan entre ellos, para crear y validar los entregables del proyecto y así alcanzar las metas de la visión del proyecto. Bueno, según esto, acá aparece, está justificado en el SDOK, seguramente lo habrán utilizado. Bueno, yo di este examen hace 2 años, tal vez haya cambiado eso. Which of the following is enfatizado en Scrum? ¿Qué es lo que se enfatiza en el marco de trabajo de Scrum? Recuerden que Scrum está enfatizado en 2 cosas. Primero, el equipo de trabajo de Scrum. Por ende, la automotivación y la responsabilidad del equipo es la respuesta correcta. Delegación de la autoridad, no, porque eso es la asignación de responsabilidades, eso se hace una única vez. Responsabilidades individuales y autoconteo tampoco, porque los equipos de Scrum siempre trabajan en conjunto retroalimentándose en el backlog. Y planificación extensiva, no, menos. Mientras menos tiempo se planifica, es mejor. Pregunta 8. ¿Cuál de los siguientes es un estilo de gestión utilizado en el marco de trabajo de Scrum? Hay 2, ¿ya? Persuasivo y asertivo. Vamos a marcar asertivo, no es persuasivo tampoco. Descentralizado. Se refiere a la tabla 1-2 que sumariza más de los diferentes tipos entre Scrum y los tradicionales. Ya, bueno, persuasivo y asertivo van dentro de descentralizado. Sumamos. Pregunta 9. Timeboxing no está terminado con cuál de las siguientes reuniones. Hay 2 reuniones nada más. Retrospectiva de la reunión de proyecto y retrospectiva de Sprint. Sprint Planning Meeting, Daily Stand-up. Esto es diario. Esto es de la de Sprint. Ninguna de esas 2. Retrospectiva, Project Meeting. Recuerden que las reuniones principales siempre son 2. La retrospectiva del Sprint y la retrospectiva del proyecto. Y aquí está la justificación. La retrospectiva de la reunión del proyecto es una reunión donde se determina ¿De qué maneras el equipo de Scrum se va a comunicar con los stakeholders o los interesados del proyecto? ¿Cuál de los siguientes enunciados de timeboxing es incorrecto? Propone arreglar cierto marco de tiempo para cada actividad. Se asegura que los miembros del Scrum no tomen cada uno mucho tiempo para hacer un trabajo en un corto periodo de tiempo. Es un principio que la dirección del marco de trabajo del proyecto tiene restricción de tiempo. No, no es, definitivamente. Y nos asegura que el detalle de la planificación esté listo antes de que una reunión de sprint empiece. Podría ser, pero la respuesta correcta era la 2 o la 4. Podría ser la 4 también, porque normalmente la caja de tiempo es un proceso, una metodología que se sigue dentro de Scrum para ahorrar tiempo. Y la idea es que tengas todo listo antes de tu reunión diaria de sprint. Pregunta 11. ¿Cuál de los siguientes no ayuda en la transparencia del aseguramiento de un proyecto Scrum? Como ven, estas preguntas de test están más o menos difíciles. Estas preguntas fácilmente podrían venir a un Scrum Master. En el examen de Scrum vienen preguntas mucho más sencillas que incluso hasta en sentido común las puedes responder. Pero bueno, sigamos. ¿Cuál de los siguientes no ayuda al aseguramiento de la transparencia en un proyecto? Scrum asegura transparencia mediante una visión del proyecto. Esto sí, esto lo vimos en el capítulo 1. Scrum asegura transparencia mediante planificación transparente con todos los interesados. Bueno, la respuesta 3 la vamos a considerar debido a que ya fue respondida en una pregunta anterior. Scrum asegura que todo es visible en el proceso del equipo mediante un Scrum Board, chart, sí, han cambiado algunas cosas, ¿no? Han actualizado el SBOK. Así como ocurrió con el PMBOK en la versión 6, le ha dado más énfasis a los interesados y al tema de comunicaciones. Parece ser que el SBOK le ha dado ahora más énfasis también a la gestión de interesados, porque esto no era así, como les comentaba en Scrum. Al Scrum Master y a los stakeholders los veías una vez nada más a lo largo de todo el proyecto. Pero bueno, ahora parece que sí le ha cambiado. La transparencia de Scrum nos dice que permite todas las fases del proceso de Scrum para ser observados por todos. Es nuevo, esta parte monitoría no lo tenemos. ¿Cuál de los siguientes pares relacionados al modelo de Topman de procesos dinámicos está incorrectamente enlazado? Storming, team tries to accomplish work. Forming, team is mature with experiencing. Norming, team begins to solve all internal difference. Performing, team is in a optimal level. Esto sí, esto también, esto no. ¿Qué? Pues si acá me está diciendo que el forming estaba basado en experiencia. Bueno, ahora sí les digo muchachos que tienen que estudiar porque ahora sí está un poquito más complicado, ¿eh? Estaba más fácil hace un par de años, un año y medio, el fundamento. Tienen que verse todos los videos bien y también les voy a por si acaso dar el manual. Pueden dar hasta 3 intentos del examen, así que no se preocupen si fallan a la primera, pueden leer o revisar los videos y dar el examen una segunda oportunidad. Es gratis, así que no se preocupen, no van a dar también todo. De acuerdo al SBOK, ¿cuál de los siguientes no es una dimensión de negocio o dimensión core de la colaboración? Articulation y awareness sí lo son. Adaptation o appropriation, cualquiera de las dos podría ser. Bueno, adaptación no lo es. Aquí te dice, solamente son 3. Awareness, articulation y appropriation. Cuidado, articulación y apropiación. Son esas 3 únicas dimensiones de colaboración. Bueno, al menos eso sí me acuerdo. ¿Cuál de los siguientes no es un ejemplo de un principio de Scrum de proceso de control empírico? No es un ejemplo. Usar Scrum Board para asegurarnos la visibilidad clara en el proceso del equipo de trabajo de Scrum. Y usar la planificación para liberar el cronograma y asegurarnos la coordinación entre múltiples trabajos de Scrum. No, la 2 no es. La 3 tampoco, por ende nos queda la 4. La 1 estaba seguro que no es. Pero la 4. Usar una cantidad arreglada o manejada de tiempo para cada proceso de actividad en un proyecto de Scrum. Correcto, lo que les expliqué hace unos momentos también. Esta explicación sí me parece válida. Las decisiones son realizadas en base a la observación y la experimentación por cada uno de los miembros del equipo. Por eso decía que Scrum le da énfasis a que los miembros del equipo tengan ya cierta experiencia y puedan tomar sus propias decisiones de manera independiente, pero a favor del equipo de trabajo. Todos los enunciados del equipo de trabajo de Scrum son correctos, excepto a ver, provee las entradas para la creación del plan de colaboración. Sí, esto es como el alcance, sí, es verdad, eso es correcto. Estima las historias de los usuarios por trabajo del Product Owner. Esta de acá la tenía en duda porque, como les digo, ¿no? El equipo de trabajo no trata con los interesados, pero bueno, ahora haciendo memoria, sí con el Product Owner. Prioriza los enunciados con el backlog y desarrolla el listado de tareas. Esto sí estaba seguro que sí. Entonces, la respuesta era esa. Eso no es un enunciado del equipo de trabajo. No prioriza el backlog del producto, sino del mismo cliente y del mismo equipo de trabajo, de las mismas personas. Sobre qué de las siguientes expresiones no está especificada en la 3 es correcta, la 4 también, no, ahí sí nada de esa pregunta, no me acuerdo. ¿Cuál de los siguientes enunciados de colocación es incorrecto? En resultados de bajo número de flexiones entre los miembros del equipo de Scrum, facilita la información de manera formal y la interacción entre el equipo de trabajo, asegura que los equipos de trabajo puedan coordinar, resolver problemas y aprendan sobre la. La respuesta 4 es obviamente la respuesta, porque recuerden que los enunciados y todo lo que tenga que ver con equipos de trabajo de Scrum, en este caso de colocación, es siempre a favor del equipo de trabajo. Bueno, última pregunta, ¿cuál de los siguientes no es un principio de Scrum? Obviamente la respuesta 3, esta pregunta ya viene en la primera. Bueno, tenemos un 56% resuelto, deberíamos haber llegado a un 75%. Nada, he tratado de darles algunas fijas, pero les voy a ser bien sincero, el test ha estado mucho más difícil que el examen en sí. Hay cosas que normalmente se les pregunta a un Scrum Master, no un Scrum Fundamentals. Pero bueno, lo importante es que les he podido ya dar algunas facilidades. Muy bien, eso sería todo con respecto al capítulo 2 y el test. Ahora, para que ustedes puedan dar el examen, sea en inglés o en español, vamos a ponerlo en español, en lenguaje en español, se van a ir acá, a esta opción que dice mis exámenes, y acá hay varios exámenes que les va a aparecer con costo cero o le va a decir free. Se van a ubicar en el examen, en el estado, les va a aparecer la opción de dar el examen. Fácilmente lo único que tienen que hacer es dar un clic, ¿no? Y va a empezar el examen. Ahí les va a especificar cuánto tiempo tienen y cuántas preguntas son. Normalmente va de 35 a 50 minutos, son 35 preguntas. Y las preguntas son de sentido común en realidad. Si han visto bien los videos y los han captado, miren, por ejemplo, les va a aparecer algo así. Miren, aquí hay un examen nuevo interesante. Profesionista en estrategia de comercialización, o sea, profesionista. Experto en estrategia de comercialización y especialista en estrategia de comercialización. Bien interesante. profesionista, ya no a nivel certificado, nada. O sea, ya no a nivel básico, sino era profesionista. Chévere, voy a dar estos exámenes después. Y tal vez podamos hacerlo en medio de una clase virtual. Ya. Bueno, esto será para después. La idea es esta, les va a aparecer de esta manera con precio del examen 0 o les va a aparecer free. Le dan clic en el botón, más o menos para que entiendan, ponen nada más sus datos, no les va a pedir tarjeta, no les va a pedir tarjeta a los que tienen gratis, pero si les piden simplemente poner una tarjeta, si no la tienen no hay problema, pueden usar la de su vecino, la de su amigo. No me cobraron ni un sol, yo también he puesto examen gratis. Entonces miren, yo he dado todos lo de estos fundamentals, pero ahora están hablando de profesionistas y especialistas, así que voy a dar esto después. Y nada chicos, eso sería todo. Entran, dan el examen y empiezan a dar su examen. Mucha suerte a todos los que vayan a dar el examen. El examen es sencillo, como les digo, es el sentido común. Los test sí han estado mucho más difíciles. Son 35 preguntas, necesitan el 75% para aprobar. 75 sobre 100 de 35, 26 preguntas aprobadas, 26 preguntas correctas, respuestas correctas, y con eso obtienes su certificado. Mucha suerte chicos, y nada, eso sería todo por mi parte. Si tienen alguna duda o creen que quieren darle otra repasada a los videos, bueno, pueden entrar a mi canal de YouTube que les estoy dejando en los comentarios, les estoy dejando también ahí en Twitch, y revisarlo. Ahí voy a subir también esta parte 2 del video, o simplemente verlo directamente desde el portal, ¿no? Entran en la opción de SCRUM Fundamentals y ahí les va a aparecer. Abren el capítulo y se ponen a ver todos los videos. El capítulo 1 es donde hay más cosas, el capítulo 2 es la parte más técnica. Y si necesitan manuales o materiales de referencia, ahí también se ponen a curiosear. Y aquí está la guía del SBOK, lo ponen en español si quieren, en PDF, y le dan a descargar. Y se va a descargar. También acá está SCRUM Fundamentals Certified, esas son 290 páginas. Esta es la tercera edición, yo lo di en la segunda edición. Es 2017, o sea, yo di el examen y sacaron la tercera edición, por eso decía, qué raro, si yo me acordaba de varias respuestas. Y nada, ahí pueden leer, básicamente está en español, esto es como la Biblia del PMBOK, es lo mismo. Si se fijan, utiliza varias cosas iguales. Entonces ya los dejo su curiosidad. Y nada chicos, quiero ver después de que den sus exámenes, que diga el estado, pase el exam. Una vez que diga pasaste el examen, descargan el certificado y por favor lo suben para ver sus certificados. Lo descargan en PDF o con imagen como quieran y pueden añadirlo hasta su LinkedIn. Nada chicos, eso sería todo con Scrum. En unos días les voy a pasar el dato para dar el de Six Sigma, pero ustedes si son curiosos pueden ir dando algunos otros exámenes de Fundamentals como ya les he mostrado. Eso sería todo, muchas gracias, cuídense.